my name is Chiara Cristina Ventura, and you are listening to AW Classroom Podcast, where we interview young artists and creators of color doing their thing in the art world. And today we are here with AJ Girard.
What's up, guys?
And I am so excited to interview him because I remember the first time we met was at the Underground Museum because the homie Jazzy was like, you have to go to the Underground Museum and you have to ask for AJ.
Shout out
And
to
I'm
Rep
so
Club.
glad we did. Yes. Shout out to Reparations Club. So yeah, AJ, please introduce yourself. What do you do? And also, like, what are your titles? But in a I'm asking this in a very like expansive way. Like, how would you describe yourself as a person? Are you a lover, a caretaker?
Okay.
Like all the
Yeah,
things, all the things.
definitely. Shout out to that. I love that. So yeah, my name's AJ Girard. I guess for sure, educator, arts educator. That's my passion. That's my life's goal. Black arts educator is like even more specific. A giver, a student for sure, always trying to learn. And yeah, I mean, right now, I guess I'd lean in on just like the idea of curating. Curator is the role I want to occupy in the art world for the time being. I want to create conversations. I want to learn best from artists. I want to engage people in what those artists are thinking through and make it make sense in a visual form. So that's where I'm at right now.
Nice. Yeah, something that has come up a lot during the pandemic is a lot of art history students right now, art history students, also people doing like museum studies, they are having a hard time like navigating this time, like almost all of us. But there have been a lot of people who reached out to me about, just asking like about my journey and like all of these things. And I also wanted to bring you here into this space so they could hear about your journey as well as a young art historian. So can you take us back into your journey and how you got into the art world, and also how did you get into like studying art history? What was that experience like?
Man, thank you. Super throwback. And I want to just start off by saying, like, anybody who has this feeling, it's like you're not alone and it's going to be all right. Like, let's just like breathe that part out first, because I know the future can look very dim and like where are the opportunities, but like I'm a rare case of like I just kept one foot in front of the other, in front of the other, in front of the other. And then I look up and like I'm in rooms that I wanted to be in. So like just kind of hold on to that thought. But for me personally, yeah, I mean, I'm from Texas, so I started in a high school setting. Actually, like my parents just knew something was different about me and they put me in a program. I went to a performing arts high school, which was kind of like a magnet school where you studied the cluster, like visual art, performing, like dance, singing, or maybe even theater. Left that, went to undergrad for art history at Howard, HBCU, because I had a commitment to people, to folk, like my community, and I really wanted to see what I could do with that. After kind of getting that under my belt, came back to California. Life hit. Everybody needs to make bread, and like, how do we do that? And I found myself taking like odds and ends jobs, like kind of at this point asking these questions a lot of myself, like, what am I supposed to do, and why did I study that if I'm only going to do this? And like, everybody thinks I'm a creative, but like, as an art historian, I could always say it was that question of like, do you make art? And my answer was no. And that's a very awkward place to be in, where you just like love the passion of the thing, but you don't produce it. Or you have homies who are making art, but then they're really like antisocial to all the other parts of the world. So they're like, all they do is make art.
That's why we're needed.
Yeah. And a lot of times they're like, I don't talk about it, I just do it. So then it's like, damn, okay, how do we translate people like knowing about what you do? So yeah, I found myself at the Broad. It was a brand new museum that opened up in LA, and I got hired there as like, straight up, like the role was really undeclared, undefined for me. I thought it was like I could walk in and like talk art on this like fast-paced New York cool level, but it was like not no shade to anything, but it was like a docent. It was the job. It was a security role. You kind of stood there with the art, and if you wanted to talk about what it meant, you were more than welcome to, but it wasn't a super requirement. And because I'm a talker, I definitely took advantage of talking. And I think from there, I created a community that literally sustained me and kept coming back and talking to me about the works. And like that passion created all these small gigs for me where people were like, hey, like, we know you're into the art. Like, we want to bring you into this conversation, into this thing. Do you have advisories for us? Like, are there people that we should be thinking through? And that eventually found me to my second institute. Actually, yeah, I worked at CAAM, which is African American Museum in LA for a little bit. And then I moved to the Underground Museum where I kind of became their community outreach coordinator, which if you guys know anything about the Davis family, Noah Davis, the painter, he was very connected to this idea of like Black owned art spaces that did something very different than what most institutions did. And it was an amazing crash course for me in like really learning what it meant to be creative and a part of something, but also like on your own terms and doing it in that way. And that passion has like fueled me all the way up until today, where I kind of introduced myself as a curator because I'm organizing a show for a major gallery in February. So I say all that to say, like, it is super possible. It is super, you gotta trust in whatever faith system you believe in. A lot of these times, like, you have to make sure every interaction counts. This is not a field where I found like sitting back and waiting was a help. I mean, half the people who I call friends, or like even y'all, like, yeah, we were sent to each other, but like you take advantage of that and you really build a relationship. So, but y'all got this. I just want to say that because I know I used to be super studious and like I would go sit on sit and listen to panels and be at every opening and like getting super nervous when like Thelma Golden walked into the room because I'm like, oh, it's getting real up in here. Like,
you have like that fan moment of like,
yeah,
like I have to speak to them. Like,
I was like, nobody was like understanding why we were talking. Then all of a sudden, I just stopped talking because I'm like, Glenn Ligon is right there, and I don't know what's there. Like, Amy Sherrod is right there. I just like,
oh shit.
So I say, like, it's dope that we're in this kind of niche space as art lovers, you know, and we actually can take care of each other for sure. Like a lot of my jobs came from like people just being like, that kid's really into art. Like, y'all need to talk to him and like find him something to do. So
I mean, also while you were talking, I was like, yo, like docents, like the security at a lot of these museums are just magical beings. Like
the most passionate people. And that's what's so messed up about the system of this thing is that the people who have the most intel, who spent the most time next to the work, are literally never asked what they think about the work. And I mean, shout out to Fred Wilson. Like, he kind of created a whole art piece around how a lot of times these are people of color. These are bodies of color who are standing next to big, well-known, oftentimes white men's work and are never asked their opinion on the work. So like, that's a rebellion in itself. But yeah.
Because like 9 times out of 10, anytime I ask the security guard like anything about the work, like they just give me so much insight that I'm like, yo, I'm so thankful that I talked to them. It was even when we saw the David Hammond show.
Oh yeah,
David Zwinner. Yeah. Oh, Hauser and Worth. Yeah. Yeah, there was a security guard there, like asking us questions, like engaging us with the work, and I was like, "Yo, this is dope," you know.
And I want to share a story quick too. Like, I went to my favorite museum is the National like African American History Museum in DC, and you know, it was back when it was like super hard to get in there. You had to have reservations, whatever. One of the docents let me in, and then they also like kind of gave me a quick little tour vibe on their break, and they took me to this piece, which I'm sure is not news to anybody, but there's an African sculpture on the cultural floor, like where all they celebrate like the sports achievements that we've done and the music achievements and all that type of stuff. There's an African sculpture there that literally is the architect design that David RJ used for the entire building. And it's sitting on the top of this like African sculpture's head, like it's a part of the headdress. And when she described that to me, it changed my entire relationship to that building. And this was a damn guard, bro. Like, this wasn't the curator. This wasn't David himself. Like, this was somebody who, you know, so we just, you know, again, like knowledge, information, importance, like that shit lies everywhere. So.
Yeah. So I also want to talk to you about the work that you have done at the Underground Museum.
Yeah.
Because I mean, going into that space is like no other museum I've been into before. And I think it also has to do with you too, because it was like my first time going into, my first time going into the Underground Museum. And then we walked around and then we bumped into you. And then you like took us to the garden, and then you took us into the offices. And like, I was looking at Cameron like, oh, we VIP. Like, and then, you know, you sharing all this information. I was like, wow. But also just walking into the space, that museum has a very like genuine, organic, like energy in there.
Yeah.
I could tell that it, you know, like with you even telling us the story of like Noah Davis and everything, like you could tell it's a spiritual space. So yeah, I really want to know like how has your journey been with that museum, and what is your relationship with that space?
It's like, man, I mean, so you hit it on the head with the word spiritual. It's one of those things where I feel like my commitment to it, so I have an idea of it in my head that's been like, you know, basically not to go too far into the narrative, but it's a couple, Karan and Noah were a couple of artists who kind of, I like always kind of say, gave their all to this idea of free space, think space for creatives of color. And like, that's what I live by, because I remember my first interaction of like, the world that I've known is not the only route that I had to live my life in. And like having that fuel in college and like an art history class, like I wanted to make sure everybody got that burst of like, oh damn, like I'm supposed to be able to think differently. And then not only that, like my seat was intended for me. Somebody made this seat for me. Whatever I'm going to do with this seat has to make sense for my community. Like all of this stuff comes together. And I feel like my experience at the Underground, like that's really what it has been. It's just like learning that all that me wanting to talk to people can be translated to like helping someone feel special. And sometimes it's art history thing, and sometimes it's like the yoga classes that they do, or sometimes it's the supermarket, the food give back that they do. Like I've had to like pivot into a lot of different spaces in my own personal life, because it's not necessarily how I always engaged with joy. You know, like I've changed a lot, and I think that that's dope. I'm also super inspired to really believe that like what the art world is like. This is something I've thought through too. Like HBCUs kind of give you this like leverage where you're like, you know, like it's the beautifulest, like I don't know if you've ever been to like a Howard homecoming, like to see everybody around you look like you and expressive and enjoy. You can take that for granted. It's like the ultimate, like it's what you want, but then that's like somebody had to create that. Like somebody has to make that. And I think that you leave that space knowing that any creative, we have to do something to make this happen everywhere that we go. And that to me is really the interesting charge of the Underground Museum. It's like, it's a safe space, but it's really supposed to be replicated in every experiences that we have, you know? So yeah.
Like that's, see that experience that I had, and I'm pretty sure you gave that tour experience to a lot of people that come into that space, right?
Yeah.
It you know, it makes you feel special, and I think it's super important for Black and brown people to feel special, to feel important, to feel valued, especially in museum spaces. Like, you know, I think that's the thing. Even when I was coming out of like high school and I was getting more into art and going into museums, I had to like overcome like this anxiety of going to museums, because I was afraid like, oh my gosh, the security guard is going to tell me like I'm too close to the work, or like, you know, everything's so fragile. Or I remember I was an intern at the Met, and you know, they give you a badge and everything to come in, you know, to go inside and stuff. And when the internship was over, I was like, I'm still going to use this badge to get in and jump the line. Right? So, you know,
every museum I've ever.
Right? Right? Just to be like, hey, you know, whatever, I'm part of staff, like get in, right? So of course, like it was like literally like not even 2 weeks after my internship finished, like I went back to the museum, like with my friend or whatever, and I'm walking around like with the badge on, right? And I'm at the contemporary art section, and then a lady comes up to me. She was like, "Oh, let me see your badge." And I was just like, "What are you talking about? Like, I interned here or whatever." She was like, "Oh, well, if the internship is over, you're not supposed to have the badge on, like whatever." Like, she told me to like get out of that gallery, like that section.
Like,
And then she took away she took my badge. And I was just
wow.
like, yeah, just like she was an older white woman. I was just like,
Of
wow.
course. Yeah. Of
You know
course.
what I mean? Like, it's experiences like that that is just like, oh well, am I even supposed to be here? You know? So I think, yeah, having more of those inviting, and you need people to do that, right? You need people to relate the work to the visitors, and like have, you know, help people see themselves in the work too.
It's
Um,
always interesting to hear these stories because when I hear this from my own community, I'm like, I'm so humbled by whatever has been created for me. Because that to me is like
mhm,
mind blowing because our
mhm,
expression is so dominant in these spaces. Like literally everything that they have ever even thought the magical they like have created has become inspired by our expression. So it's
mhm.
so funny to me that we feel so foreign in a place that we've
Yep.
kind of created. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I
yeah.
always sit with my audience when they say things like this because I'm like, AJ, it's not even about you at this point. Like a lot of my work is fueled by hearing, and you're saying it in a very clear, concise, like,
Mhm,
manner. But I've had people cry in expressing themselves in this way. I've had people
mhm.
very frustrated, shutting down any idea of art in the sense of like cuss words or like don't want to be in the space. Like I've had people not even want to walk into the museums before,
Mm. Yeah,
calling it white people stuff, like a lot of
yeah.
different things. And I mean, so yeah, sometimes I just shut up and listen. I'm like, damn,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
have to be this person at this point. Like, thank
Yeah.
you for saying that. I'm like, wow, you have to,
Mhm.
and not even the person, but a person, like
Yeah.
somebody doing work.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is definitely the role of like a curator, is just like, well, how can
Mm,
I make spaces more accessible? How can I educate people and invite them in?
right,
Like, you
right.
know, and it's also, how do I get, you know, a person who isn't really comfortable or doesn't even think about like going to museums or galleries? How can I get that average person like walking on the street into the space? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And invite them in
yeah,
and tell them like, hey, like this space is for you.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of stigmas that need to be talked about more in the art world, because I feel like even till this day, like, you know, even people who are studying art history and like young students, like there's still this boundary, like this barrier that people put up saying like, oh well, you know, let's separate us, you know, that
I have
that
so much to say
intimidate.
about that. No, I hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I being in this field, I found like even my studies, there were times when I didn't see myself reflected for a long time. And then when I kind of got to a place where I was like, I seen it in the sense of like, jokingly it was a Basquiat was my first introduction to like, oh my God, like I exist in art space in real life. And then after that, recognizing like he's just like he's a lot of people's entering vehicle, but he's not it. There's so many beautiful names, and as I unpack this, there's so many names that like we've never heard, and there's a reason why we've never heard of them, and all of what that feels like. And then I'm like, having to listen to some of the OG curators, like I love Thelma's work, I love Naima Keefe's work, I love Kelly Jones' work, I love Noah Davis as a curator's work is crazy. And there's not a lot of times that people have seen him in that fashion yet. But when he does do it, it's like, this is mind blowing stuff. You know what I mean? And so I think about that in the sense of like, even my job is not even just to like only talk Black and brown art, but like to put it in a conversation that was like, these people were existing at the same time as these rich, bright, white male names. And for whatever reason, we're not in the fame, the canon, and the whatever, except a couple of them at a time. You know. And I think we're in the space now culturally where we know better. We just don't absorb everything that we've been given. We do research. We like alternative stuff. We like underground things, so it's a dope time to exist. For sure.
Like, and with the pandemic, I think people have more time on their hands
For
to look
sure.
at art and
Mhm.
like see what they like and follow, young artists on Instagram and get into their
Mhm.
work and be fans. So I think, and it's also what's really dope is that there's a lot of Zoom events and like events online that you could pop into
Yeah.
and be like, and talks and panel talks that make these conversations more accessible. So yeah, that's definitely beautiful. I also want to get into just your thoughts on art history because
Yeah.
it's there's so much work that needs to be done. Like
And if you feel crazy, anybody listening to this, you are literally not alone. And if you
yeah,
feel stressed and invisible, like, trust me, I
yeah,
think sometimes I'd be like, it's supposed to be like this. It is literally built for half of us to feel super erased, super crazy, super non-credited, and it will exist like that as long as we allow it to. So I think, like, I encourage us to, like, do the research, get into it, get crazy, get comfortable being crazy. And I know what that means. I know. I mean, I say that to say, like, everybody's vibes of what crazy is different. For me, it just means like having so much information and not knowing where to place it all the time. That's where I can get crazy. Where I'm like, this is beautiful work. Somebody else needs to see this. So if you're my friend, I'm definitely be like, I tell my friend it's like a friendship contract. I will take you to a museum. We went to one. It's like 2 days into knowing each other. It's like we have to create these access channels for each other. So yeah, let's talk about it.
yeah. So I want to know, like, because I don't know. I know you went to Howard, so that must have been beautiful to like study art history there.
Yeah, yeah. There's some
um,
foundational work.
yeah. So I want to know like what was your education like in art history there, and also what I emphasize like to a lot of art history students right now is like I mean, yeah, there's a lot of institutions that aren't speaking about Black and brown artists in these art history classes, and we are just, we get one class that's like the non-Western art requirement, and then the rest of the classes are European artists. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Black and brown students in these classes that are like feeling like they're crazy. You know what
Oh
I
man,
mean?
yeah, for sure. I'm
So
with
it's
you.
like what I tell them is like, oh, find out ways to continue your education or just educate yourself outside of class. So, and I know you also have a lot of catalogs and everything. So I want to ask like, what are all the things that you do to like educate yourself on art history and even artists of now?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question to ask because I'm like, there's times when I haven't really formulated it as a response. I think I just reacted to the fact that I didn't have any presence in these conversations and like never gave up on that want. I just kept, so like in short, like the closest answer as I look around my own space is like, yeah, I buy art books with whatever money I make, whatever fashion I try to like squeeze myself, whether it's like used books or whatever. I prefer actually used books because I like the history that they hold. But self-educating on artists of color has really been the number one thing I do. So I try to, especially at the top of COVID, as you noted, there was so much time. I committed to reading like one art book a day, one art book, and I don't mean that it's like sometimes you can't finish them in a day, but like over time, if I finish one, it's like jump right into another one. And I found in those ways, like you'll connect artists, you'll connect curators, you'll connect writers, you'll connect where these shows are traveling to, and you can actually start to see like what spaces and why and what conversations we occupy. And then in that way, I feel like I battled the years of art history that as you mentioned, like I'm learning from them. So Howard had a particular history. There were artists like Alma Thomas, and there was a foundation of like, especially if you think about the African American Museum, like when you've never been taught your own history and then there's sort of work that people want to do to like give it to you, everybody brings their best foot forward and you get this really rich culture of like a community of people who've tried to keep us going and keep our images up. And so like I think knowing that investment was gave to me, I try to make that happen. So like for me, I think through my own book collection is like, yeah, I'm educating myself, but there's times when these catalogs be like expensive, bro, like $50, $60. And I'm like, I could do this or I could whatever. But lately I've been like, there'll be a student, there'll be a kid, there'll be a person, there'll be a moment when you need to bring that book off the shelf because of whatever they're processing, whatever loss that they feel. And that may be the therapeutic thing for them. And some of these bookstores that I kind of go visit, like they have substantial Black art book collections in the back, like in the space that they like kind of preserve for themselves. So like, you know, this is certainly like an unwritten history. And I think we definitely need, much like they have gatekeepers, like we need our own gatekeepers, we need our own historians, and like your work will not be in vain. And I know it feels like there's times when, I mean, I literally was like, if I have to read another Renaissance, Rococo, Elizabeth, whatever, I'm gonna go crazy. But
Madonna and Child.
when
Jesus.
literally, Jesus everywhere, like the frescoes and the everything, or even the, I mean, down to the damn 80s. Like I remember when I took the job at the Broad, they had a Yayoi Kusama exhibit, and I never heard of this woman in context because it's like it was the Andy Warhols, it was all that type of stuff, and she's right along with them, and I'm like, it ain't just a Black conversation. This could be a women artist conversation. This could be a brown conversation, an Asian artist conversation, whatever you want to call it. Like this is a fight. Unfortunately, this is a fight, and the craziest thing is like we've already won it because we're so expressive. Like not to go on a tangent or a rant, but like when I would give my tours, like the first thing I would say is like a lot of this art is yours already. You've seen this in your households when you wake up to culture in the morning. Your mom is singing, the type of food that you're eating, the type of clothes you're wearing, all that will translate into this work. Like, don't forget that when you look at this stuff. It makes you feel foreign, but it's truly not. Like, Picasso knew what he was looking at when he was looking at it. You know what I mean? So, like, don't ever give up on that. Shout out to that was my run on bad jaw.
You would when you said that, I got goosebumps.
Oh man.
But yeah, like damn, I got the goosebumps and then I forgot what I was gonna say.
No, I'm sorry, yo. Just because I always, no, I'm so sorry. I know I kind of went on a bag, but it's like
no, that needed to be said.
Quit so much because it's one of the things I thought that was Rayelis actually said this to me in one of our studio visits together.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of mentioned like Black people, brown people's kind of representation as a form of like, you know, like vampires don't have reflections. And this idea of like not having a reflection of yourself kind of villainizes you and makes you think that there's something wrong or negative or not supposed to be seen about you, or actually not even real. You almost don't feel tangible as a person. You feel like an idea that you're escaping. And he's like, if Black and brown people have not had enough access to various images of themselves, then of course we're going to go into every space feeling like imposter syndrome. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I thought that was the most beautiful, eloquent, well put way to be like, you know what you look like. You know what your parents look like. You know what your friends look like. Insert that into these spaces. You know, don't ever feel you need permission to do that, you know?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about. I was going to ask,
okay.
Yeah, because I see that you've been doing like studio visits. How would, like when we enter these studios as curators, usually we jump from one studio to the next, and like we're in a studio and we'll think of like a studio visit we did a few months before. We're already making these like connections in our head of like, oh, this person's talking about that, and this person's also talking about that, but doing it in this different experimental medium, and like, so what are some ties that you're seeing between artists' works right now? What are some things that are just up in the air that people are talking about in their work, and like, what are you seeing in these studio visits?
I found this, I mean, maybe it's surprising or not, I found a lot of artists are super bold. I mean, artists of color, the artists that I'm dealing with, are super bold about their like non-exclusion of like white voice at this point. Like it seems like we finally got to a place as a people where we're not necessarily responding or reacting to the art history that has been presented to us, but we're actually kind of getting very insular, and like the works are like about our family because we've all been in a crib or in the cave for like since March, you know, and it's like only thing you're looking at is your parents or your music. And so all of this is actually showing up in the work. And it's really beautiful because every visit that I've had, we're literally, I mean, even in this conversation, I can't say that we're starting in a reaction to something. We're literally just like, this is who we are. And I know that may not seem like a big thing, but like that's a privilege that our like folk ancestors didn't even have like 20, 30 years ago. Even in some ways, I think through like Noah is one of my favorite artists. Like 5 years ago when he was alive, he was looking at a very different world for the underground even than the world that I'm living in that way. And I just look at like, yeah, studio visits have been inspiring me to know that there are a new wave of artists who are literally creating whatever fucking chaos that we're in right now, creating some beautiful images for us to come out of. I mean, even the show that I'm organizing, like I've been thinking through this idea. Me and my, I have a co-curator. We've been bouncing back on this idea of like, yeah, like, well, you know, lifting the veil, like wiping our eyes from all this. And again, like we don't even know where the world's going to be in a week or two with the choice, like the candidate choice, but still like we know that as a people, there's some survival skills already embedded into us that will show up in this show. And it's amazing to see artists like visualizing that in tons of different ways, whether it be figurative or through like installation art, sound art, whatever that looks like. People are like responding. So even to like, I always talk to my visual audience, even if you feel a jolt of creativity, like capture that, because this is a moment, like we're marking a whole different like transition. I hope no one comes out of this the exact same person as they were before, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah. So I have a few more questions left.
Yeah, let's go. Down. I love this conversation actually.
Yeah. So I think people like us in the art world, especially for younger people, it's good that we're doing what we're doing and we're letting people see what we're doing, whether that be on Instagram or whatever, right? And also letting people have access to us, right? And also to know you don't have your MFA, right?
No.
I don't have my MFA.
No. There's days when when it pulls on me, but then there's days when I'm like, but look at what you're doing without it, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's super important that we're doing work within institutions, outside of institutions, kind of like just free flowing in a way and showing people that it's possible.
For sure.
So, and also showing how multidimensional we are. So like my question is, where do you see yourself going? You know, because also what I have been thinking about like during quarantine and everything is like, yo, how can I be experimental with curating? Because curating is really tying different things together and tying artworks together in a space, but it doesn't always have to look like a gallery space. Curating could also be like curating a playlist, you know what I mean? Just organizing things and making connections between those different things and objects and sounds and whatever. I'm trying to see how I can like expand myself as a curator, right? Mm-hmm. So where do you see your work going and expanding through time?
And I just would say, before I even answer that, your particular work has always impressed me, and I've always liked engaging with your ideas, because like when I saw what you did at Reparations Club and the types of like very distinct voices you brought together in that space, and like those who are watching may or may not know, like Jazzy's spot is like a free space. It's like a concept shop. She's literally created this like zone where even in the title, like Reparations Club, like we're getting our due just. We're kind of getting what we deserved. And like meeting you through that work, I thought was really impressive, because I'm like, this is someone who I need to know in the field, because she's not waiting. There is no idea of permission. And like, you're taking it and you introduced me to so many artists in that moment. And so I'm like, I'm fueled by you too, as a even a colleague, you know, like
Thank you.
we get so ashamed of like all these alternative spaces because they can feel uncredited for whatever reason in our mind, but that's not the case. Like one quote that has really fueled me through life from someone at Howard, who passed away, Reggie, was like, artists, like if you're a painter, you paint. If you're a dancer, you dance. If you're an actor, you act. Like you don't wait until you're in a movie. You don't wait until you're in an art show. You don't wait until you have a dance to practice your form. Like you do it every day. If it's really what you do, you have to do it every day. And for me, that translated to like, if I love art, I'm gonna go to a show. I'm gonna go to an opening. I might even go back to it if I didn't really sit in with it. I'm gonna read an art book. I'm gonna do whatever. So I hear you, like curating. I was recently on a MoMA panel with like Miranda July and like all these people. And like shout out to that because my first panel was in January of this year. So like to go from like having like a artist on me like ask me to talk to like having MoMA ask me to jump on a talk is because I was engaging, you know what I mean? And I think that like at the end of the day, like I felt in that moment, it wasn't even about the accreditation of MoMA. It was like true testimony to like AJ, you do this when your eyes open to when your eyes close and it's showing and people are catching vibes with you. And I meant that to say like something came up where it was like they named me a curator and I hadn't officially started to put that role on my like resumes and stuff yet. And I literally Googled it, curate, to show care of, to show love of, to like something. And that doesn't necessarily have to be deemed by the Met, the MoMA, the Brooklyn, the Bro. You can curate a bouquet of flowers, you know, or like a music playlist, like, and the passion will read through.
What mantra do you tell yourself when your day is not going as planned, or I don't know, maybe you have like a bit of anxiety, or I don't know if you experience imposter syndrome. Sometimes I do. Me and Cam talk about it all the time. Yeah, what do you tell yourself? What are some mantras that you tell yourself in those moments?
Thank you for this. Thank you for these wonderful. I mean, it kind of went from a Zoom call to a real therapy session, real up in this thing, and I appreciate that because like only art folks know. Like hell yeah, I'm anxious, and hell yeah, I'm experiencing imposter syndrome all the time. I don't even know how to escape it. And I think to be kind of fair to myself, like that's sometimes what this book reading binge can be. It's like this always this voice of like, you're not the real thing. You don't know this stuff. You don't embody this. And it's so false. So like one of the things I think about with painting, it's like its job is not to be beautiful. Its job is not to be your everything. It's an experience. It's literally to push you towards an idea. So a lot of times I go into the work looking for ideas and a feeling versus like a beauty. Like it's sustained, like it's kind of even selfish to think that like this thing is supposed to make me feel beautiful only, or like please my eye only. No, it's supposed to complicate your life. It's supposed to challenge you. It's supposed to make you think harder. It's supposed to make you think smarter. It's supposed to make you think alternatively. And so when I give myself as a form of art, my experience of life, another form of art, that same privilege, it's like, yo, there'll be days when you lose. And I'm telling you this out of like a person who can wake up with severe depression where I don't want to move, especially the way the art world works, where somebody falls out of favor with you or an opportunity didn't land, or you lose something that you kind of were accounting for. Everything can feel like it's like not worth it at that point. You're like, why did I even study this shit? I could have been a lawyer or whatever. I could have made money. You know what I mean? And I think about that all the time, but I'm like, bro, it's an experience. You're gonna like today may be bad, tomorrow may be good. You know, like today you might have to learn the hard way why you love what you love. Are you gonna stop? Sometimes there's times when like, especially as I try to get to this place where I share art on social media as a moment to like create accessibility. A lot of people have misunderstood that. A lot of people think that that's like me looking for social clout or like an Instagram check or whatever that looks like. But it's like a lot of times I found I'm doing the work that institutions can't do, which is like get to the point. we want to see beautiful pieces that motivate us to live. And at the end of the day, the bureaucracy of institutions can create this, like, you're seeing Andy Warhol for years, but you'll never see a Julie Moretti. Why? I'm not going to do that. If I can see Julie Moretti, even if it's in a book or whatever, I'm going to create access for my community to see works that reflect them. And again, I say that to say, like, there's times when that's not understood, and it hurts me, and it makes me feel like we're not supposed to be in these spaces, and nobody wants to answer the question why. So, like, again, when I kind of started this conversation about feeling alone or feeling like this isn't worth it, like, you're not. A lot of curators who have been in this field for a long time have given me the same advice of, like, you're not crazy. It is crazy inducing, but this is a part of the journey, and then you kind of get to a place where you recognize it, like, you'll create your own I statement. You'll create your own reasons as to why you're doing it. And then that will show up in your curatorial statements, in your studio visits, in these panels. Like, people will bond with you as a person. And it's because you're like, this is for real. Like, I love our friendship. I love what that means is, like, we started off as, like, someone's suggestion of an idea, like, two artsy people should connect. But here we are creating space for other people to, like, feel seen and visible in. So yeah, it's real, I don't know. There I go with another rant answer.
No, I feel like when people say, like, I'm gonna go on a tangent, but blah blah blah, like, those are the like the quotable shit. You know what I mean? I'm just like, there are so many times where I'm just like, yo, I would take that and quote it and put it in an article or some shit.
I'm only saying what I wish someone had said to me on any given day of my struggle and trying to find myself, especially those days when I was just a guard. I mean, I felt so imposter syndrome because I was like, my job ended when I clocked out. I did not need to be at these panels or at these openings. That was me being like, I want to be in this field, bro. I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna, like, push yourself in, whether the door is open for you or not. I'm here.
I wonder if a lot of curators are like, here you come.
Yeah. After the panel, introduce yourself. Hello.
That was me.
Yep. I remember going up to people after panels and just, like, my voice would be so shaky, and I'll be like, hi, I'm Kiara Ventura. I'm an art history student. I love your work. Like, I don't even know what to say in those moments, but I'm like, they need to see this face though. Like,
and trust me, they remember and they recall. And that's the thing. Like, I always charge, like, elders and community a little bit who's, like, secure to remember, like, the job also is to, like, pass the baton back and to make space. And I know that they think that they're doing it on a day-to-day basis, but, like, sometimes, like, those moments of, like, meeting your favorite artist can make or break your entire experience with their work after that. And I kind of got to a place where I started to give a little bit of freedom because, openings and that type of stuff can be so, I'm learning, you're driven by, like, collectors who want to buy pieces, artists who are nervous about people's perceptions, cool kids who just want to come for Instagram, whatever that looks like. And then here you come as an art historian kid, like, I love that book that you wrote.
And
like,
also
whatever.
Just, like, but, like, also just, like, that exciting part of, like, you have been following the work, but you never saw it in person. And then you go to that gallery or that museum, you're like, oh shit, it's right in front of me now.
Right here.
Different from a picture. You can see the freaking textures and shit. That's what it's about. Yeah.
But trust me, one day the day will come where these people are like your peers. And like, that's the thing. Like, don't give up on yourself and don't give up on your I statement. Because I used to do that a lot. I used to feel so freaked out by, like, we keep joking over it, seeing these artists, but I flub stuff too. Like, there's times I've met artists and didn't know that's what they look like in person. Or even, like, authors. I get really messed up with authors. I'll be like, hey, nice to meet you, I'm AJ. And they're, like, saying their name. And I'm like, my mentor would be like, she wrote the book that you have on your book. I'm like,
There's a lot of people like that.
Bro, and you'll find, like, people don't go into rooms, like, introducing themselves by their work, so you wouldn't know. But, like, just be gentle with yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, this takes time. For real.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Of course.
I can't wait.
Have fun.
Yeah, I can't wait for people to listen in on this conversation and also get to know you and your work. Where can
Yeah.
people find you on the internet so they can follow
I'm
what
only
you're
on
doing?
social media right now. I've kind of like tried to control that part of my life. I'm on
Mhm.
Instagram. AJ Girard is my name. That's my at name as well. I have upcoming work at the Deitch Project that I would love you guys to be invested in. It's literally like a labor project right now. After Jeffrey Deitch in Los Angeles, I'll be organizing a show that is all artists of color that I'm extremely passionate about because it lands on February, which is Black History Month. So I literally am hoping to create a safe space for us to just kind of breathe. I know this is getting harder and harder and harder. So I've been working hard to do that through visual
Mhm.
art. So I'm pushing people through that. Support Black owned art spaces, the Underground Museum and
Mhm.
CAAM and Reparations Club and different bookstores and retailers. Like, I know that
Mhm.
that's not necessarily where you find me only, but like those
Mhm.
places sustain creates these conversations. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, buy
Yeah.
Black and think smart. So,
Hey.
yeah.
Thank you. And make
Of
sure to
course.
follow AJ. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I feel like there were moments where you were talking, I was like, yo, you a motivational speaker. Like
Bro, nah, my truth. This is just my truth.
yeah.
I can't. I'm a survivor. I get it. This field is hard. It's so hard. I appreciate you too. Like I really meant that when I said I was really inspired by your work and your relationship and the fact that you guys are like two young, really passionate, bright creatives. Like that's not easy. And I love y'all
Yeah.
too. Just
Thank you.
I keep going because I know that I have real community. And like I said, this computer
Mhm.
stuff feels weird, but there's something on the other side of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll see each other on the other side in physical form.
Yeah. So,
Dope. Well, we're going to end on that note. Thank you so much.
bye.